Let's kick off on your views on where we stand 15 years down the line. You've been working in Africa, leading teams into Africa, advising African countries that look to reform themselves, create a better enabling environment for private investors. How's the scene changed from where you started to where we are now?
Well, we're at a very interesting time in Africa's history. We've had the first time now that Africa is actually growing significantly faster than the average global economy. We're looking more like an emerging market front runner than we are looking like an advanced economy. And this is a new state of affairs for Africa. We're familiar with seeing Africa lagging behind the normal average growth statistics. The second important thing is that certainly over the last decade, the amount of absolute poverty has dropped from 58% of the population to about 47% of the population. So over the last 10 years, we've seen a very significant decline in the number of people living in total absolute poverty. That's below about $1.25 a day. Now, these two are very important changes, and the question we're all grappling with at the moment is, so why is this? Is this just a result of the commodity price picking up, price of oil picking up, and maybe China's involvement in Africa, or is there something more fundamental going on here?
Yeah, so let's answer that question. Are we looking at a case where African countries and, we've had change in governments across the board, they're making reforms right now that are really starting to bear fruit and create a lot more of an attractive environment for investors?
I believe this is the case. There certainly has been, the involvement of China and the growth in commodities has been very important to Africa. It's put a bit of oxygen into the system. But for the body to really do well, you need to have hearts, lungs, and gallbladders and all sorts of other things working. And that's what I think we've got right this time. If you look over the last 10 years at the fundamental changes, if you're wanting to create a good investment climate, there are really four main things you need to focus on. You need to focus on getting stability. You need to bring the wars to an end. You need to bring the coups to an end. You need to create a foundation of stability in a society. We've done that.
Yeah.
By and large, huge progress in that over the last 10 years. Second area important is macroeconomic stability. Trying to get inflation down, trying to get governments to live on about the amount of money they get in and keep the inflation rate under control so that people can take decisions based on real indicators. That's been achieved. The third area which we're focusing on now, which people are focusing on, is the microeconomic reforms you need to get more businesses to exist, to get people to invest in infrastructure, because we need a lot more infrastructure than the government's ever going to be able to provide in Africa to fuel the fast growth we're getting, and of course to bring in more finance to fuel the businesses being started. So these are the areas where the work's being done at the moment, on all the microeconomic changes on an industry by industry basis, which help people to set up a business, to get going, to get access to finance, to get access to capital, and to be able to produce their goods and services on a platform of infrastructure which is produced. And this has been the exciting thing which has started happening over the last decade.
David, as I said, you've been doing this for 15 years now, looking at trying to implement some of these micro reforms. Give us your views on which countries have been really shining lights in terms of implementing reforms and being great success stories.
Well, probably the most famous one at the moment has been Rwanda, which really, in a determined effort to put its violent conflict of 1994 behind it, has focused on rebuilding its economy. They've made huge changes in their economy over the last decade, and they've been determined to improve. We bring out an annual ranking which we call Doing Business, which is basically how easy is it to do business in an economy. And Rwanda has been the second greatest improver in the world. Rwanda and Georgia have been the two great improvements in the world. Rwanda went up from something like, off the top of my head, 167 in the ranking up to about 47 in the ranking over a 3-year period. And this is basically because they introduced a number of laws which made it easier for people to start a business, made it easier for people to lend to businesses so that financiers were prepared to put money forward to finance businesses, and they've been able to make some of the key infrastructure investments which need to be made. And so that's an example, but that's one of many. What's interesting is a number of the formerly conflict-affected countries have done very well. Liberia really turning itself around, Sierra Leone turning itself around. South Sudan's done very nicely. closer to home, Zambia is doing very nicely at the moment. Mozambique's been stellar, coming from a very poor position to a somewhat better position. So we're seeing constant reform among a number of countries. Of course, this is what's important. You don't want someone who's a one-year wonder. You want people who are determinedly improving their environment for business and changing the rules so it's easier to invest in the country, including in infrastructure and to bring in finance. And this is a signal to investors that this is a government which is determined to make progress. So I would say at the moment, I'd say about 23 countries are moving.
Great. That's, obviously about half the amount of countries in Africa. Now, the IFC, of course, is the lending arm to the private sector of the World Bank. You invested $3 billion in Africa last year. How are you leveraging that to get further funds into Africa? Tell us about which investors you're getting into Africa, private sectors. Is it private equity players? Is it other IFC institutions that you're getting to invest? Is it governments? Where's the money coming from?
Right, thank you. Right, IFC's investment over the last 8 years, we've gone up from about $600 million invested in a year, investments and loans, as you say, to now over $3 billion. So very significant growth. One of the things we've done over the last 2 years is we've opened up a separate wing called the Asset Management Company, which really focuses on trying to help sovereign funds who would like to make a small investment into Africa, and so they invest alongside of us. So we bring a lot of the sovereigns behind us as well. IFC, of course, raises its own money by floating bonds on the market and investing that money into emerging markets. We tend to focus on the areas now, we're trying to focus on the areas where we think it's more transformational. So we're focusing on infrastructure and we're focusing on agri. We believe that if Africa is to make good progress, we need to get much more private sector into infrastructure. We need to get much stronger investment in the agricultural sector. So those are two areas we're focusing on, but we invest heavily in banking. A decade ago, we were doing a lot in the telecoms area, and we invest always together with others. So the IFC will always take a minority position in an investment alongside others.
David, thanks for sharing those insights with us. David Bridgeman, manager of the Africa Investment Climate Team for the World Bank Group.